Nice work, Pat. Very interesting, very interesting. Hi, welcome to our show, Karate and You. I'm your host, Master Art Bynes. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to explain a little bit about our show. As you know, Karate and You wasn't designed specifically just to promote United States Black Cat Kempo Karate, but to promote all styles of the martial arts, so we may all unite in a common cause to help improve our country and help make it a happier, healthier, safer place in which to live. Today's show I'm sure you're going to find quite interesting because I have some very special gentlemen with me, and they study Kung Fu. And those of you who are not familiar with Kung Fu, you're going to get educated today on the subject. Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce these handsome gentlemen. And the gentleman to my left is Mr. Patrick Hanvey, and he is a what we call third dan or third sash. Is that correct?
Yes.
In Kung Fu, and that's China Hand Kung Fu. Nice to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you.
And this distinguished-looking gentleman to my right, okay, is his partner. And his name is Mark Gates, and he is also a third dan or third sash, black belt in China Hand Kung Fu. Nice to have you also on the show, sir. Okay, so like we tell you time and time again, I'm sure you're finding this show quite interesting today. Sit back, turn on that VCR, and we'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Karate and You. I'm here on today's show with two very special friends and colleagues in the martial arts. This gentleman to my left is a third dan or third sash in China Hand Kung Fu. And Pat, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions if we could in the beginning of the show. First of all, what does Kung Fu mean? What's the definition?
Kung Fu means hard work or great achievement done by yourself.
Okay, and where did Kung Fu originate?
China.
China, okay. And how much training have you had?
Both Mark and myself had studied the Peter Kwok system for 8 years.
Okay, and is that locally, or where'd you have to go for that?
We studied with Peter in northern Jersey.
Okay, now, one of the things we were talking about before the show is that usually in Kung Fu, the classes are very limited. Is that correct?
Yes,
when both of you studied together?
Yes.
Okay, how many people were in a class at that time?
Just Mark and myself.
Oh, so you got a lot of individualized attention then. Okay, and Mark, what about you? You did some training prior?
Yeah, a little bit of judo
Okay.
while I was in the Navy.
Judo? Okay.
Yeah.
And in regards to the judo, I got a question for you. Why the transition from something so rigid as judo to Kung Fu?
Originally, when I was in the Navy, I had seen Tai Chi performed when I was in Hong Kong. And when I came back here, I wanted to find a teacher to teach it to me.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. Now, in regards to the Kung Fu, as far as ranking is concerned, how does the ranking system go in Kung Fu, Mark?
There is no real ranking system in Kung Fu because on such a small class size as you generally have, the teacher and the student always see each other, and the student is always aware of how he's doing, and the master is always aware of how well he's doing.
Okay, so...
Generally, we have black sashes not to grade or rank somebody, but just to show that a person is a serious student.
Okay. Serious student, and hold up your pants, correct?
Hold up your pants, right.
Okay, I like that. All right, what are you going to be doing for us today, Pat?
Today we're going to do some Tai Chi and Hsing Yi.
Hsing Yi, okay.
Both internal styles.
Meaning?
Internal stresses more feeling than muscle.
Okay, all right. Well, you guys, the show is yours. Now this first form he's doing is what?
This is going to be the Tai Chi short form. This is the form that we teach at our extension centers at Brookdale, and Freehold, and Neptune, and Fort Monmouth. This is an introduction into Tai Chi.
Okay. Now this would be something that if you traveled over into China in the middle of the noon, you might see people doing out in the street?
Usually early morning. Usually they get up about 2 hours before it's time to go to work, and it's usually performed by older people in China. I don't see many of the younger people doing it. They prefer the Shaolin or basketball or just something that's a little bit more strenuous than the Tai Chi.
Okay. Now this is, right now what he's doing is a simulation of movements defense movements, offensive movements? What actually is going on right now?
This movement here is called step back, repulse the monkey. We have these little poetic metaphors for each movement, which helps you remember the name of the movement. And later in the show, we'll be doing some two-man form, and we'll show how some of this stuff is applied in martial application.
I see. And about how long does a form last?
This is the short form, and what we're doing today is we're modifying some of our forms because we don't really like to show our forms in their entirety. So this is a modified version, and this form usually takes about 3 minutes to perform. The next form we're going to do, long form, usually takes about 20 minutes, but again we're going to modify the form.
Yeah, we don't have that much time. Okay, now everything seems to be going in a circular, spherical movement. Is that correct? Is everything supposed to flow into each movement? How?
Flow is a good word. This this movement is called wave hands like clouds, or cloud hands.
Very graceful.
The continuity of Tai Chi is one of the things that really stand out. That we say the form starts in the beginning and goes through to the end is one movement. We don't look at it, even though we learn it as separate movements and put it together. Actually, a form from beginning to end is one movement.
And about how many different forms are there in the Tai Chi system?
In our Tai Chi system, including weapons, there are 10 forms.
Whew. And this is the short one?
This is the short one.
My goodness. Okay, now, besides the form in itself, what other way of training do you do in Tai Chi, or is this primarily it?
In the Tai Chi, we have, in all the Kung Fu systems, we have two-man forms that we do, from very basic things like push hands, which have just 1 or 2 movements in them, to more elaborate forms like the combat form that have about 25 movements in it.
My goodness. I can see why that one-on-one is so important, retaining all those movements and technique. Now, while he's moving around, is he breathing? What type of breathing is he doing?
Very natural. In the Tai Chi, we stress natural breathing. Instead of saying that every outward movement is a breath out and every inward movement is a breath in, we let the body adapt to the form instead of letting the form suffer because of your breathing.
I see. Now, as far as the physiology about your technique as far as generating power, I noticed that all the movements are very smooth and flowing. How do you generate power in a technique if you were practicing to develop power in Tai Chi?
Power takes a very long time in the internal styles to develop and is generated from the waist and is something that is seen through its beauty and grace like a dancer.
I see. Nice work there, partner. Boy. And the watch is still ticking. Okay, what are you going to do for us now, Pat?
I'm going to do some movements from the long form, which is a little bit more combat, has more of a combat stance to it.
Okay, and I'll be talking to Mark while you're performing, sir. Now, this is the long form of Tai Chi.
Right, this is the long form of Tai Chi. This is actually called Quin Pin Yang Tai Chi. And what you'll see is the stances are a little bit more deeper and less committed forward. It's more of a 50-50 stance.
Looks like as though there's a little bit more angular movement in here also.
Yeah, this form faces all 8 directions. The short form, if you notice, only went in 2 directions. This form faces 8 directions.
Now, does that indicate that he would be possibly being confronted by various different attackers?
Well, what it allows him to do is to move in any direction that he wants to.
So primarily he becomes more versatile, I assume.
Right. In Tai Chi, there are 13 what they call postures, and of those 13 postures, 5 of them are just looking to right, left, or advancing and retreating, or staying centered.
A posture meaning a stance? Or?
Well, I guess a posture really, in that sense, is attitude.
I see.
Okay. You would warding off or fighting to the right, fighting to the left, advancing to strike, retreating.
I see.
Those kind of things.
I see. Okay, Pat, very interesting.
What we're going to do now is, Pat just did the long form. We're going to do an application form to the long form. What this teaches the student is how all of these movements in long form, which look kind of strange at places, how they're all applied. Okay. And what you'll see is techniques being used and deflected and turned right around against the attacker and being sent back.
Okay. Very good. Okay, nice work there, guys. Now, that particular form that you're doing here, if we could just turn this way here, Mark. That particular form, let me get in the middle, pardon me. That form that we just did there, is that a prearranged movement, or is that kind of a free-flowing type of thing?
Yeah. No, that's all prearranged. It's all choreographed. One technique has a counter, and the idea to it is understanding how the energy is coming in and what to do with it.
Okay. Now, I noticed that a couple of times during that form there was a little explosive technique in there. What exactly is going on at that point there, Pat?
Some things are difficult and slowly. So anytime that we leap, you can't really leap slowly when both your feet leave the ground, or when you do some kind of kick, so it becomes a little bit more explosive.
I see.
Like Mark says, we're really dealing with how to deal with energy. If I'm standing there like as a target for him, and if he's going to round punch me, if I stand there, of course he's going to hit me. If I try to block it, if he's stronger than I am, then he's going to come through my block. So what I do is I give him a target, and then when I understand what's happening, I move out of the way and I use his energy
Very interesting, very interesting.
So timing is a very crucial factor in the internal style.
Now, with this form that you're doing here, it's done very slowly, very controlled. Is there any training that you do where it's a little bit faster? Or is it primarily that's the way that you do your training?
In a Tai Chi, it's all very slow like that. The Hsing is quicker, is much quicker. We also have two other systems, Shaolin and Ba Kwa. Shaolin is pretty quick, and the Ba Kwa operates at a moderate speed.
Okay. Now, I see you got a lot of weapons here. What are we going to do with all these things today?
We're going to do some Tai Chi with them. Along the lines you were just speaking to Mark about doing things slow. What happens when you do it slow enough, you know it well enough, it becomes instinctual. So your reflexes become lightning speed. It becomes a reflex action. It doesn't have to go to the brain and register. He's doing a number 22 strike, I have to use a number 49 block. It doesn't go to the brain. It just registers right in the nervous system and comes back as a reflex.
Becomes more like second nature, I guess.
Right, so something happens, you react to it, and after it's done, you say, oh. But then you, in your mind's eye, you say, this is what I did.
I see.
But when you do it, it just comes out naturally.
So more or less, it's like learning how to ride that bicycle. After a while, you don't have to think about it at all.
Right. In China, we have students who travel to China. A lot of people travel to China today, and we had some students who went to China, and they were bicycle advocates. They bicycled everywhere they went, and when they went to China, there was a bike race the next day, and they entered it, and they said, great. And as soon as the starter's gun went off, they took off, and they looked behind them, And they didn't realize, but the object in a bike race in China is the last person to cross the finish line wins.
Oh.
The slowest you can pedal without tipping your bike over.
Oh, really?
And if you don't think it's hard to do something slow, let anybody try something slow to do anything that they know more slowly than they normally do it, and it takes a tremendous amount of muscle
And
and discipline and
yeah.
concentration to do.
I'm sure the bike races weren't very long distances, were they?
Down the block, I guess.
Yeah, down the block around the corner. Okay. What are you going to do for us next, then?
Broadsword? Do broadsword.
Broadsword? Okay. Let me get off the way here. Make sure I'm way out of the way for that broadsword.
Broadsword in Chinese is actually called a knife. It's not even considered a sword because it's so short.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people look at swords today and they say that their training with a sword isn't really practical today because people don't use swords, they have guns and everything. But a sword actually is just a larger knife. So anything that you do with a sword, you can actually do with a knife. And of course, Mark is doing Tai Chi again, so it has the same feeling, the same rhythm as the Tai Chi solo forms. And if you ever invite us back again to do some Shaolin, we'll show you some Shaolin broadsword, which is a lot different than the Tai Chi, but using the same weapon.
I'm sure we'd like to get into that, that's for sure. I think Shaolin is probably most widely known, wouldn't you think?
Yes,
Due
the
to
David
movies.
Carradine series really popularized the Shaolin. And that was a very good philosophy of what Shaolin is it's something that is learned over a lifetime.
I trust that sword's not too sharp, is it?
No, that's a demonstration weapon.
Okay.
But the Chinese swords are different than anybody else's swords. They're not like the Japanese swords made out of bimetal, which were made much more recent than the Chinese. Chinese weapons and swords are made out of spring steel. So they don't look too formidable. They're very wobbly, but they're razor sharp. The idea of a broadsword, which right after Mark gets done, we're going to do a two-man set with the sword and show you how it's applied.
Okay.
What we try to do with the sword when somebody attacks you with a weapon is we usually go after the hand that's holding the weapon to make them lose the weapon. Then we can do anything we want to them.
Right. So more or less you want to control the weapon, you control them, I guess.
Right.
I see. Okay. Looking good, Mark. Okay.
Okay.
And now you're going to do a double here. Okay. Now, before you begin, I notice you have a couple of strange objects here. What are they all about?
This is a 9-ring broadsword.
Okay. Which is any particular significance?
There's all different types of broadswords. It depends on your own preference. You know, some people have tassels on them. Some people like the noise that it makes.
Primarily aesthetics? Not really
Now it is.
function?
Yeah. The rings here also strengthen the back of these, okay, from these kind of strikes. The Chinese broadsword was notoriously thin and brittle. While it was real flexible, it was brittle. If you struck it hard enough, it would break.
I see.
And the rings sometimes helped reinforce the back.
I see. Okay. Makes it a little more rigid, I guess.
Yeah. Well, allows it to withstand a strike like this that would break it because of the rings.
Okay. Okay, gentlemen, just watch me with those things. Nice move. Okay. Mark, I noticed that during that form there, that is made no contact whatsoever with the swords.
Right, that's correct. The idea to doing this is, if you notice, when we attack, we're always attacking what would be considered the attacking arm. I don't care about the rest of his body. If he hacks at me, okay.
Let me get around this side of you, Mark. Here, go ahead.
If he cuts at me, what I want to do is not stop it like this.
Right.
Okay. As this comes in, I want to cut it right here.
Okay. Cut the hand, and you take care of the weapon.
Yeah. Then he's weaponless, and
Then you start doing the dissection.
Whatever I do, all right.
Okay, getting ready for turkey.
Sometimes when you use sword against sword, say if Mark lunged at my head, I can't stop his sword with my hand. And
Right.
if I can't get out of the way, I might block it with my sword, then hold him at bay,
Deflecting.
then
from
come
across.
in and do the cut.
I see.
But we really frown against clashing,
Yeah.
weapon against weapon, strength against strength, because it could be the strongest person is going to usually win in
I
something
see,
like
and
that.
it also kind of throw off the flow, I imagine. Energy, there's reaction.
All right.
Okay. All right. Now, you got a pretty interesting one over there. You're going to use that one next for us? I like that one. I know all the kids in my karate school love to look at that rascal.
This is a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword was considered the queen of the battlefield. It was a weapon that requires a lot of finesse and dexterity to use. If you watch, when Patrick is doing all of this, you'll see a lot of cutting and slicing actions rather than too many stabbing. There'll be some stabbing actions, but most of the action is in cutting and slicing. These the double-edged swords were razor sharp, and one of the techniques to use with the double-edged sword was just to lay it on top of someone's shoulder or arm and draw it backwards to cut the arm off or to cut the neck.
It's almost like the one you'd find somebody swallowing in the circus there.
Almost, not quite though.
Now, are these movements similar to the ones with the broadsword, or is this entirely different form?
No, different weapon, different form. This form is geared to the movements that a double-edged sword would perform.
Okay, so application is entirely different here.
Yeah. If you see, most of the techniques are deflections. There's a stab. We'll have a stab that follows. But if you watch now, slice and another slice and a draw back. And that's the end.
Very nice. Very nice. I really like that form. That was my favorite so far. Nice movement there.
Being a double edge, you can really hurt yourself with this.
Uh-huh.
So you never bring this around behind you, because you can cut yourself with it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Broadsword, a lot of times you bring around behind you.
Mm-hmm. That
Double
is
edge.
actually sharp, too, huh? That could do a job on you, I'm sure.
Again, it's a demonstration weapon,
Uh-huh.
but the Chinese weapons are
Very flexible.
very flexible, spring steel.
Right.
But
What is the
razor
what's the
sharp.
reason behind having a flexible blade?
And they're difficult to stop. If you, if I slap something like this, it'll whip right around. Okay, so even once it wraps, if I pull it back, it's going to cut in and pull out. Yeah,
I see. Okay.
it's difficult to deal with,
Uh-huh.
being so flexible.
Okay, we got a couple of, we call them spears, or?
Spears, Mark mentioned that the double edge was the queen of weapons.
Okay.
This was the king of weapons.
Okay. Before we do anything, we're going to have to leave the king alone for a while, and we have to take off for a little break for a second. But I'll tell you what, why don't you just start something, and we'll kind of fade out with you doing a little bit of that.
Okay.
Welcome back to another closing of Karate and You. Before we close, if any of the viewers out there, you have any questions, or you might want to pursue a martial arts career in China Hand Kung Fu, you can do so by contacting China Hand Kung Fu Academy That's at the Ocean Martial Arts Center. And incidentally, if you're interested in some martial arts equipment, you can also purchase martial arts equipment at the Ocean Martial Arts Center. And that's 1719 Highway 35, Ocean, New Jersey, 07712. And the phone number there is area code 201-531-2005. And as far as the China Hand Kung Fu classes are concerned, they have classes in the evening hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and day classes on Sunday. Also, they have an introductory class, which is absolutely free. Also, China Hand Kung Fu Academy, they teach an 8-week course, and that's a Tai Chi short form, similar to what you saw on today's show, at Brookdale Community College, Fort Monmouth, Neptune High School, and Freehold High School. Gentlemen, before we close, I'd like to thank you very much for being on the show as a guest. And you got to come back, because I got to see the Shaolin. Can you promise me possibly next week?
We get gas money?
You get gas money, and I'll tell you what, I'll take you to McDonald's afterwards. How's that, Mark?
Oh, that's just great.
Okay, anything you'd like to say to the people at home before we close up?
Yeah, well, we would like to say that you probably shouldn't use these weapons or any of these techniques that you've seen on here unless you've been properly instructed in them. It took us a long time to learn these things, and we're very safe with these, and we know what we're doing.
Okay, so we don't want to hear about anybody out there playing around with anything around the house. All right, this is Master Art Bynes. Thank you for inviting us into your home, my friends, and they're going to do a little spear work for me, right? Okay,
Nice.
Thank you very much. Till we meet again, have a happy, healthy, safe day.
Okay. Upper horizontal. Let's do the lower one.